fantastic.
Let's do it!
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Weird Science Comic Boom Indie Comics podcast. I'm here with my man Rocky. What up, Rocky?
I'm a little bit depressed. It's officially fall here. It's psychologically for me because it's always fall here when I have to cover up my barbecue. Because every single time, without exception, when we reviewed these indie comics, I know we missed last week, but I've always barbecued a steak. But the barbecue's covered up, raked all the leaves, so it's winter's on its way. Supposed to get 10 inches of snow this week here in Canada.
Oh, see, I was going to say it usually comes probably a little quicker to you than it does here in the Philadelphia area for me, but it's pretty cold. We had to actually get oil delivered, and I'm still recovering from getting raked over the coals with that. We have oil heat. It's ridiculous. It's so bad, but here we are. I'm here in my basement. It's actually pretty chilly tonight, so I'll go with that idea of it being pretty much fall in the spirit of things. But speaking of the spirit of things, it is Halloween weekend, the end of October, the spookiest month of the year, and we do end up having a spooky book that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about two books tonight, and I will apologize for last week. That was all on me. We didn't have a show. I haven't been feeling so well, and I usually don't get sick. And recently, I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just his lack of sleep and, not being very active at the moment. But boy, it hit me hard. I don't even feel great tonight, but I'm here for the spooky books, and we're going to start with one that we actually like, and I'll say that this is kind of a spooky book, right?
Kind of. It deals with a devil cult. I mean,
yeah,
come
it does.
on.
It's funny because I want to say, and I really want to tie it into that, but it's kind of like a fun type book like that because it's one of those where I don't know that the people in this book really realize what things are going on here or what is happening to them for the most part, though I think some actually know more than they're letting on. But it is true cult. Now, I'll tell you, with the V's there, it does drive me nuts. And I did actually hear somebody reviewing it and desperately trying to say Trve Cvlt. I'm like, nope, I'm not doing that. It is true cult. And it's something that me and you have enjoyed. We actually enjoyed it. It was like one of those things that we said, it was a cool thing because we wouldn't end up usually reading something like it. But here we go and do it. And we were pretty impressed by it. And actually, as we go on, we had the first two. This issue, I don't know, it takes a little step backwards for me, but I think it might just be one of those little lulls in the deal trying to set up some things. But it is issue number 3, A True Cult. Soft Skills and C- Nachos, written and co-created by Scott Bryan Wilson, art and co-creator Liana Kangas. And what did you think?
I thought this was a little bit of a lull in the action for me too. I never enjoyed this one as much as the previous two, but I do think it's leading towards something.
Yeah.
There are some. We'll talk about it obviously as we go through it, but there's definitely some moments that were funny that I did find that I chuckled to myself, and it engages with some kind of a little bit tropey and a little bit.
Yeah.
A lot of things got a little bit tiresome a little bit, but there's still, this thing has a sense of charm, small city charm about it with yet world-ending stakes, because I'm wondering if this devil cult is actually the real thing or not. And so it's planting all these questions in my head. And it's got almost like a small sitcom kind of comedy, and just when the characters get a little annoying, they become a little bit more endearing in parts. So
Yeah.
it's hard for me to get a handle on it and put a real
I'm with you.
Yeah.
And now this is, and you had to have read it because you know me a bit with the comic side of things and whatnot. And you do end up getting to points where it is very heavy dialogue. And there are points, though, where it's heavy dialogue on purpose. It's supposed to be like that. It's supposed to be, I mean, especially when you go, because all this going on, they want to have pretty much our main guy, Marty, go and kill this Dr. Shipper, this bad devil Satan deal. And so this plan, because they think he is such a genius, they end up giving the plan. The plan's so intricate that it lasts, like these word bubbles are so huge, and then it continues, and then they kind of go to the end. And so you got all that? You probably know. You're a genius. I'm like, they are so screwed.
Yeah.
They are gonna, but yet when you go, they seem to remember most of it. I mean, most of the plan seems pretty well laid out for them, but again, I think that there's some other things with Allison going on. She every time Allison opens her mouth, something else crazy spills out. Like the idea that, oh man, she's just obsessed with being a worker at a fast food restaurant, which she still is, but boy, she's got a checkered past suddenly, and it did make me chuckle with that, and that's what I like about this. The stuff I do like are the characters and their interaction and things like that. Even, everybody else, even including the cult that they end up in, they're pretty cool, but overall, you are just kinda getting to this place. You're going in and trying to get to this guy, and again, it's like another Satanist cult deal where you walk in and there's just a pentagram and an upside down cross right in the foyer. You know there's trouble. Uh, but even then, this actually feels a lot like it is like a Kevin Smith type thing, but back when I don't want to when Kevin Smith was pretty good. Like we ended up doing his Masquerade, but we didn't really like it. It really didn't have that spark to it. I think that this has that type of spark, that type of very heavy dialogue, people going back and forth with things. These guys that are driving them to, this place where they're going to make this kill, they're kind of jerk offs, but I don't know. They kind of feel real, but they are kind of dicks about it. I don't mind them, but really, I think at this point, the book to me is driven mostly by Allison. With her, she's the one who always has nervous talking, always going on. Even when you have, Marty just looking out the window, she's all upset at this taco place. The drinks they have fizz pep, and I don't like fizz pep. And it just keeps going, and even Marty agrees and knows all this, but he's kind of more worried. She just seems, I don't know, she's oblivious, but yet knows a lot. Very odd, but I do like her character.
Well, it's funny because this lead character, Marty, he's a loser. I mean, that was
Yeah, yeah.
clearly established in the first issue. He was he tried robbing somewhat successfully, unsuccessfully at a lot of the smaller businesses at the local mall when in the very
Yeah.
first issue, and he ends up meeting this Allison girl who's applying for a job that he's the manager of at this burger joint that they work at, and then lo and behold, it ends up through a catastrophic chain of events. He ends up stealing this record that apparently belongs to this Dr. Shiver, who's a leader of this cult of the or this Church of the Immortal Heartbeat.
Yeah.
And what makes this so odd is this leader or this lieutenant of this cult, this Veronica woman,
Mhm.
who uses up pretty much all the dialogue in this issue.
Yeah.
She's outlining them the plan. She thinks somehow that he's a criminal genius, and she
Yeah.
wants to send this failed burger guy who's worked at a burger joint for 5 years into the desert with uh, to this huge towering headquarters of the Church of the Immortal Heartbeat, which is really tall, but it's actually underground, and it's 66
Mhm.
levels underground. Of course, it would be 66 because it's all like devil
Yeah,
related.
yeah,
All these little
exactly.
cliches. And it's funny how you mentioned about the use of the dialogue, as Veronica's telling him the plan, like, we won't kill you, but we want you to kill Dr. Shiver because Veronica's got plans to take over this Church of the Immortal Heartbeat.
Mhm.
And she's explaining to him, this is the master plan. And the hilarious part,
That's
of course, is that
hilarious.
there's no escape plan. There's no way for them to escape
Yeah.
once they get in there, and even assuming they find this Dr. Shivers. But it's very interesting with the use of the dialogue because it's obvious that when you see that much dialogue crammed into two huge word balloons, as a reader, especially seasoned readers like us, we know that that's trying to convey something else,
Yeah.
not just the words. But there's actually quite a lot of substance in what she's saying because it contains the plan,
Yeah.
but it's what it's omitting in the plan that actually contributes to the story. So it's one of those things where it's almost a little bit annoying as the reader, but yet it's a little bit
Yeah, I even
rewarding if
got to
you
the
read it.
point where you almost get in the point of view, and it's so overwhelming that you have to sit there and think. Because I'm going to tell you that I think that as you're reading it, you would think as a reader that you might be smarter than old Marty. So you're reading it and you're like, huh,
Yeah.
I don't know what you said there and what's going on there. And by the time, especially for me, by the time I get to the end, I think it's on purpose. By the time I get to the end, if you quiz me about what I just read, I'd have a lot of problems giving it back to you. And I think that's the play. You're supposed to be so overwhelmed with this plan that you think that there's no way that Allison and Marty have any clue what they're doing. Even then, though, they're like, "Oh, so we don't have to," like, they actually end up questioning it. I'm like, maybe they are made for this. But the play of just thinking that Marty is a evil genius, this mastermind guy, just because he ended up stealing a couple quarters and then happened to just go buy a delivery truck and grab this record deal. And I still don't quite get the idea of her thinking that and why. Like the idea that she's, oh my God, nobody would ever be able to steal this record. No, it's just so over the top, but she's all in. And I thought at one point in this issue, I thought seriously, we were going to have them leave. We were going to have these guys who are driving call back to her after they go in. Hey, we dropped them off, went in. What do we do next? Oh, those idiots. They're just there because I know that they're cannon fodder and they're going to play. No, no. She actually is like, they're geniuses. They'll get out. Like she never goes against that.
Yeah.
I really thought that the big wink wink joke was that they were just using them as patsies to really push them. You're geniuses. You know what you No, it seems like she really thinks that. It's very odd. And remember, also one of the big plays of this is the idea of being in that cult, they're living too long, and they just want to be able to kill themselves at the end and kind of get out of that and try to fix this. But that is also pretty funny all the way over on. But then it got a little confusing as it went when you're going and seeing some things going on, some flashbacks and stuff like that, right?
Yeah, it did. Because it was funny because part of the scheme in order for them to infiltrate this Immortal Heartbeat church is they got to go through because they're posing as basically a couple, Allison and Marty. They're posing as a couple, and they got to go through what they call an actualization process. And for those to relate this probably to something that's common in we see in media a lot is the Church of Scientology. They have like an actualization, different types of
It's
process.
exactly what I thought of the Q meter and stuff that you
Yeah,
have in that. It really felt like that. I
yeah,
actually thought it might be a little too on the money for their own good. Like, you better watch out what you do. But
yeah,
it did feel like that. It
yeah.
really did.
I think it has something interesting to say, but I never really read anything. I was looking for a deeper meaning into what I'm about to describe, and that is Marty's actualization process because they put on sort of what looks like an Oculus, which is
Mhm.
like an Oculus video reality thing, and you can live different lives. And the idea is that you can live as many lives as you can. You find out what is your best life, and then you will try to this church of the Immortal Heartbeat will try to help you actualize your best
Mhm.
life, and this Oculus will help you through virtual reality help you live one of your best lives or discover excuse me
Yeah.
what your best life is. And and it's kind of funny because there's 6 panel grids here on multiple on like 2.5 pages of Marty, and he calls it shitty life number one, shitty life number two.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, it looks like every single life that Marty lives is a shitty life. I don't think he actually
I
found the
know.
best life.
I
It's
actually
kind of
thought he was gonna
depressing.
break the machine. I thought that was gonna be the play of it, was the machine was gonna break. Also, the funny thing is we never see Allison. She goes off, and the big plan is they take them off, and you're supposed to, knock out the person that takes you in, and then you have this big plan. But the weird play here, there's like this weird subtlety deal of almost like that left-handed being the devil's hand, where if people used to, back in the day, if you were left-handed, they would think that you're possessed and think because when he goes to shake the lady's hand at the beginning, who greets him, he's, oh, you're left-handed. And then in the weird play in the Oculus the deal, it's like, here you are, you found your best left-handed path. I'm like, is that all this is? That's a crazy deal. But
Yeah.
what I really thought was funny, and I think Allison's might be the same deal, when he does find what they say the best life before he gets ripped out of the it kind of is just him being the manager at the Burger Lord. I mean, that's it. Like,
Yeah.
the idea the other things, I don't know. I actually were like, if you wanna get dark, it looks like he's contemplating killing himself in all the other lives, and the
Yeah.
one life that's good is just looks like he's him at the Burger Lord. That's all he needed, that's what he wants, and it is a funny play as we go because I don't really know exactly the play, but Allison, she thinks she's figured it out, where she says, "Well, they just wanted to show us some fake shitty things so then they can say, 'Hey, look, here's your best life right here with us.'"
Yeah.
But I don't think that was quite the deal, and I think that the idea where it's really gonna bug Marty that all of his lives were just either him maybe contemplating suicide, or the one time where he's doing what he's doing, or he could go with, "Hey, I'm living my best life," because he doesn't seem happy, but he never seems sad, but he seems a little veering towards maybe a bit depressed, but
Yeah.
it is kind of funny.
Well,
I thought he was gonna break the
and
machine.
he's
I
got
really
reason to be depressed, like you said. I mean, in every one of those lives,
I know.
665 of them at least, he's holding a gun, contemplating
Yeah.
what you imagine to be suicide. And it's funny that at one point near the end, they're walking down to the 600 and their 66th level,
No.
down to the, and of course they have a lot of time to talk, and you get a lot of exposition there. And he asks Allison, "What was your experience like
No.
with that actualization?" And it's like she gives a little bit of a happier sort of experience than he
Yeah.
had, and I think he lies a bit and says, "Oh yeah, me
It
too."
is funny because she basically says it seems like, "Oh, man, there was all crazy stuff, like, I was doing this and I was doing that." Every one but one was the same, and if you go by the progression, the best life he had was the 666 life. It
Yeah,
came right after the 665, so that's kind of funny, but it is just him,
uh,
"Hey, everybody, I'm here over there at the burger," like, it is depressing. It
yeah,
really is, but I like the idea of all these others, and again, if you wanna say that this is why, and you had that over dialogue at points, but that had a purpose, and this certainly has a purpose, but we have a bunch of pages that are just him going, but when you look at it as a whole, it does work. I like that the only thing is at points is his apartment changes, but it changes with, like, a poster.
yeah.
Like, "Oh, you have that
It's
poster," or you end up that one, it looks like you might even have, like, a employee of the month deal, but that doesn't care. He's got a neon sign at one point, he's got a bookshelf, but
yeah.
it's still the same him, maybe with less facial hair, maybe having a cat, but it's just he has a boring life, like, that's the deal, and then, yeah, 666 life is kind of the same, but she might be lying too, the way he lies,
Yeah.
but you have weird stuff going on because you do have that deal where she knocked out the guy that took her and then came in and knocked out the lady. And she's like, "Man, they never tell you that it really hurts knocking somebody out."
Yeah.
It's like, how do you do that? She's all concerned. There's another play at one point too that I'll mention, but she's like, "Oh, I got some soft skills that I don't really put on my application." And as we're going, we're finding out more and more crazy stuff about her. We find out as they're trying to escape and go down, actually, at that point, the idea that she was a getaway driver as a little kid for her piece of crap dad who would rob banks and stores. And so he's like, "Really?" And so that's a crazy life, right? I mean, it really is. But even other things going on, it was funny because she ends up so on, like, does she understand what's going on? Is she, because at one point she says, "Ooh, this whole thing is really gonna, affect my, career deal. Can you get a hold of HR and
Yeah.
maybe tell them that I'm there?" She's like, "Oh," and it is that Veronica, like, "Oh, I'm gonna write out a form for you to take to your boss." And
Yeah.
I'm like, "Is that real or is she just playing with her or whatnot?"
Yeah.
Because it is really she's nuts.
Well,
I mean, she
she
really is.
yeah, well, and she's nuts because she's strangely remarkably calm throughout all this,
Mhm.
as if almost like this is a typical Tuesday for
Yeah,
her
it's
or something.
everything.
Like it's really really odd. But then Marty himself just seems to be
He's just sleepwalking through it
well,
seems, right?
exactly, but you can appreciate why Marty is sleepwalking because the writer Scott Bryan Wilson does such a good job of reinforcing to the reader, especially in this issue, that Marty has a far more extraordinarily boring life than
Yeah,
we thought he
yeah.
did. We thought he was boring to begin with. But
Yeah,
holy
he's
moly,
pretty
in
boring.
not only is this life boring, but all
All of them are.
666 lives are boring for
Yeah,
him.
yeah,
And
yeah,
it's
and
depressing as
there's
hell.
been stories with that where you'll go and you'll see your alternates or through the multiverse, and you would end up, it's just like the idea when you go, people say, "Oh, I went to a psychic and they told me I was a pharaoh back in the day." And I always say every time, I'm like, "Where is the person who goes and, like, you were a crap farmer or you were nothing. You ended up being a peasant." Like, you never get the big, that's what he got. He's like, "Oh, man, let's see all my alternate deals. Oh, shit. I am the boringest person in the entire multiverse." But he kinda just takes it and he's going, but you can tell that it did bother him a bit, especially when he asked Allison, "Hey, what happened with you?" "Oh, it was exciting, but it was just bull crap. That all didn't matter." And they're big, but I'm telling you, I think that this Allison is the person where they're gonna like turn a corner and somebody's gonna come with a gun and she's gonna Jason Bourne this shit where she's gonna end up doing karate, disarm, and shoot the guy right in the face, and then drop the gun, and then start talking about the drive-in right after that. Yeah, when I get in the drive-in, because she's so, like you said, everything seems passé to her in this crazy deal where Marty, this might be the most exciting thing that will ever happen. Oh, it probably would be the most exciting thing that would happen to anybody, whether it's good or bad excitement. But she just seems like distracted with everything else but that they're going to kill a guy who might be Satan. And it's just crazy. It's really crazy. I do like at one point when they go into the actualizer and the girl who leads Marty ends like, do you ever have a thing that you were jealous when somebody was able to do something and you can never have that first time experience again? And he ends up mentioning this album. Oh, yeah, that was like when I heard Crimson Glory's debut album. And she goes, well, I don't really know about that, but I'm going to put it on my list to check out later. He's like, you're not going to do that. Like what he said, like he knows the scam, but they're just there. But in that, I think that it's one of those like he might have gotten in too deep when he saw those other, versions and possibilities that were nothing. Yeah, I think that that's where you got to see where he goes with that, what he's going to do. Because some people might like, well, I'm going to make my life exciting. I don't know about him. I just don't know.
Yeah,
I think he might get
it's
real
depressing.
depressed.
The reason why I'm inclined to think that maybe this cult is real and that maybe that's one of the
Yeah.
issue is because if this was a cult that they were really trying to suck people in, you think they would at least make one of his lives exciting.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
none of them were. They
Exactly.
were all suicidal,
Showing.
and so
I.
it's kind of it's depressing. And I
It
will say
is.
what is interesting and what the reason why I'm a little bit more enticed for the next issue is because there's a teaser image at the end of it, and it shows them finally playing that album
Yeah. Yeah.
with the
Yeah.
pentagram in the middle of the album, and what is on the album, and it looks like the leader Dr. Shivers behind him wearing sort of
Hmm.
like the horns and what have you.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
so we're so I gotta admit, I'm really curious to know who
Oh,
this
I'm
Dr.
telling you,
Shiver is, but
Marty is gonna be and this is gonna be one of those where I think he's gonna get so because this should be the heaviest of heavy metal albums of all time. This is a heavy metal album from hell itself,
uh,
and I swear to God, it's gonna be like Air Supply or something, and he is gonna flip out. He's like, "What?" He's gonna get so mad because that's kind of where he is maybe an expert at, not an expert genius of capers and Ocean's 11 stuff. This should be something he is, but even that, I wish that machine just started error, because there was no good ones. But who knows what he thinks is the greatest deal or whatnot. So at the end, maybe he's like, that's cool. Hi, I'm a man, like his same life. I don't know. We'll have to see. But in that too, we have Bernice who goes and looks for him. And that seems to be maybe where he'll get saved. But even she becomes something more than like there's some crazy characters in this book that end up just being more like I wouldn't expect her to show up to this Veronica and go, "Hey, what's going on?" "No, you smell like pickles and, mustard." "But you smell like brimstone." I'm like, "All right." Like she knows something's going on. That's, really crazy. And then they seem like they're gonna, start fighting. They look like she's like, "You tell me where Marty is right now." And who knows what's all we'll find out that the whole Burger Lord deal is some sort of other thing that Marty's there as a keystone. I'm telling you, I don't know what's going on now. This issue, I'm still intrigued by everything. I still like it. I think
yeah.
the art's pretty good, and I like that's the thing. This issue I actually am enjoying way more talking to you about it than I did reading it. Because reading
Yeah,
it, it was a
fair.
bit of a slog,
Yeah.
but it has it makes you think about all the things going on and how funny it could be and whatnot, but you don't really get that fully from the page. There's a lot of stuff we're talking about and thinking about, but that's the overall series. I think the overall series is still really good. It's just this issue, the pacing was off because of the dialogue. Then you had a lot of, I mean, even the deal of repeating the actualizer, but then you're also walking down a ton of stairs, and then you're all there's a lot of repeated panels, a lot of repetition in this, maybe just to push forward that boringness of
Yeah.
real life, or what the
I
reality
think
of
that's
it.
exactly it. Yeah.
So that then when they get to this whole deal, who knows at this point? Like I said, Allison, I think, is such a cool character because we know her, but we don't know anything about her. Like, we know she's crazy. She loves working at the festival, but you keep adding these things that who knows what happens by the end. We find out that she's leading Marty along, that we're doing like she could do anything, but Marty, he's just kind of like any person, most of us reading these books and listening now and us talking, we're not exactly leading the most extravagant, crazy lives, right?
Yeah.
So I can see myself in Marty, especially at a point where I think it's kind of a neat little play with it. I said I worked at a festival restaurant. I could
Uh,
see myself because I'm not really, I don't get motivated at points. Like I could have ended up being Marty. I'm like, oh man, like he sees me in there podcasting. He's like, I don't need that life. But yeah,
Well,
I see all this. I'm like, I like it. I like overall the series. Just like I said,
well,
this one takes a little step back.
it makes me wonder what the hell this who the hell is this Dr. Shiver? What does he
Yeah,
look like? And if his lieutenants are as crazy as this green-haired Veronica Vergisvo is
yeah.
her name. I mean, how crazy is he? And because I mean, it is pretty crazy. They got this tower in the middle of the desert, and what's their?
Hmm.
I mean, it doesn't really sound like if this is the devil. It doesn't really seem all that intimidating because even the
No.
two guys that Veronica says she sends two guys with names Vaconis and Turbik are
Yeah.
the guys like what
And
Vaconis and Turbik. I mean, how'd you like? My
And
God, how?
those guys, even at the one point, they're like, "Hey, what is this whole plan, and what's going on with that Veronica?" Hey, you don't need to know. And they even say it's like a kid in school who didn't know himself. Like they seem to be schmucks too. I mean, and that the whole play with Veronica, she thinks that Marty's is a genius. Like right away, you're like, yeah, you're not so swift either. So everybody's sus in this book in the points of different ways. But again, I'm I want to hear that record. I want to hear how they play it out and how it's presented. But I also, like you said, this Dr. Shiver, I have a feeling that he's also going to be like the craziest type of deal like Liberace or something. He'll be down there, and he like him, and then he'll probably go and do something so crazy and over the top that you're like, holy crap, that guy's evil. But I wonder because it's playing around like that this whole book. So I'm interested in it. I want to see. We should. I know that we have been already talking about what we think some of these things are, but I wonder what everybody else thinks if they think it's going to play it out in like a funny, odd, like a swerve type deal by the end. But we'll see. And that guy might be like, well, why'd that Veronica go? She's the one who's a jerk. Like I'm pretty cool. And then you're going all over the place. But
I,
uh, yeah, I'm interested in it. You still like it?
I do. I'm gonna give a shout out to cover B here. I'm not a fan of cover A. Cover A is kind of
Yeah,
depressing. It shows like he's sort of bleeding dead in the desert with his coworker looking on. But
yeah. Oh
cover B
yeah,
is
yeah,
awesome. Cover B, I love the symbolism because there's Veronica there, the lieutenant leader of the cult,
yeah.
and Marty's there, and they're leaning against a giant propped up set of French fries with the hamburger symbol on it, with the halo on it, with the skull in front. I love the symbolism of it.
I like that
That's
Marty's grabbing a fry,
yeah.
like he's gonna eat it, these big fries.
No, I
Oh,
like I think it's more symbolic of the story itself, and the story is like I said. You and I are talking about it. We're kind of struggling to get a handle on it, but yet it
yeah,
does have something to say, and it does sort of it. I like to think that if I was ever hooked up to an actualization Oculus or
yeah.
whatever that is, that I would have a little bit more variety in my alternate
I would
lives.
hope. I'd hope. I'd be like, "Next, next." I'm like, "Holy
We shall
crap."
see.
Yeah,
But
yeah, it's and, again, I do like all of this going on, and I'm intrigued, but we're like you said, we're kinda not struggling, but we're wondering what the overall scope of it is, and usually that drives me nuts in 3 issues. Usually 3 issues is where I say, "Alright, do I know this? Do I know what's going forward? Am I into it?" And I think that the mystery of it I like the way it's being played out because it's more of like it's not like a whodunit mystery, obviously. To me, it's more of like an urban legend type mystery. Like, is this stuff real? Are we seeing what we're supposed to be seeing? Are we, not seeing other things or reading it like that? And I think that that's pretty
Yeah,
cool.
and this is all over a record. This is all over like a vinyl
Yeah.
record that the devil wants. So I mean, this is kind of
Yeah.
a crazy plot line, but
Yeah, I wish that the only thing in this one, I wish that we would have leaned a little into Marty and his love of heavy metal and the visuals of going into this church and things like that. Like, I mean, I don't know how much you want to get into it with actual real life things, but I mean, when he walked into there, it'd been funny, like, "Oh, man, I saw that on an Ozzy record once," or stuff like that, just to remind you that's kinda his thing. Like, this would have been the deal, even when you played it before, the idea of people who are into heavy metal, like, "Oh, man, he must be a Satanist," but now he's with real Satanists, and he like, "I wasn't really into that crap." I mean, that was just the music and stuff, and I wish and I hope maybe they will lean into that a little more because I always have fun with that as well. Or even playing where they're supposed to get like a secret message from playing a record backwards or something. He's like, "Really? That shit really works?" Something like that. I want to go with the tropes of it and go with it, especially because of that record. So we'll see once the record goes. He'll probably start scratching like he's some DJ and it'll ruin it. That'd be kind of funny too. But what would you give it?
well, I started at a 7 to be honest, and
Yeah, I think I
like
was about
you,
there too.
uh, I'm gonna go up. I'm gonna go up to a 7 point. I'll give it the benefit of the doubt,
Yeah,
7.5, because I had
I'm gonna do exactly the
I had a
same.
lot of fun with you talking about it. I share your thoughts about sometimes just talking about it. Sometimes a comic book is better as a shared experience talking
Yeah.
about it than it is to just read it individually. So
Mhm.
I'm glad we're reviewing this issue.
Yeah, and I'm going up to a 7.5 as well, and I was thinking, and I realized where I thought it was almost like that, even maybe a little Quentin Tarantino, but more of a Kevin Smith deal in my mind,
Yeah.
is when you end up having Allison talking about the tacos. Oh, this is C. Like she's really big because of the idea of working fast food. So this is a C plus. It's got first off, I've never heard anybody say at a fast food place like that there's too much sour cream, but
Yeah.
that's fine. But she says brown lettuce. But then when you have Veronica's like, "Hey, where'd you guys eat?" And she's like, "Oh man, they got C rated." Like she has that same review of the taco. It's like, "You really ate it that crap? Remember what that did to Johnny?" I mean,
Yeah.
that's like C rate ta and it's even the title. It made me laugh, that repeated kind of deal. And it had that feel to me of almost like and I won't even go full out Quentin Tarantino, Kevin Smith, but it had that like mid 90s type of movie feel, like an indie movie feel, which I thought was pretty cool. So that is that. But we'll move on to the next book and the final book of the show. And this is the first show I think we don't have a new number one that we're talking about, but we wanted to do something horror based, and there was a bunch of things that did come out, but we really liked the first Creepshow. I know that you got a kick out of it because it was almost like a nostalgic feel for you for this. So we get into this one, and we end up having two stories, and it is Creepshow number two. You have the Gurgamora Tree by David Lapham and Maria Lapham writers, and David Lapham on art. And you have the creators' rights, Steve Fox writing and Erica Henderson on art. I'll tell you that I like this. It just the first story at points it was more uncomfortable horror than just straight up horror or the deal. I mean, you're seeing a girl get slapped. You see, I never wanted you. Like it is pretty harsh.
Yeah.
And then at the end, it really is that crazy deal. But this is Creepshow. We talked about it before, and I'll tell you right now, reading the reviews for this issue, I don't like it as much as the first one, I'll tell you that, but I still like it enough, but when I see reviews for it, I don't quite think that people get what Creepshow is. I think that they all think that this is supposed to be, at the end, the good person in the story ends up winning out, and a
Yeah.
good heart triumphs all.
Yeah.
That's not what this is. Nobody wins at the end usually in these. I mean, nobody. And the play is just to kind of think during it like, okay, get out of there. Don't do that. But most of the time in these stories, the minute it starts, most of the people you see will be dead, if not possessed, if not in hell, like that sort of thing. And people end up thinking that, oh, there's going to be a monkey paw, but at the end, this person, it's not that kind of book. It really isn't. And in that, though, I really I had a hard time in the first story, really finding anybody to latch on to because, yeah, I don't like to see a girl get slapped, but then she ends up kind of being possessed and is threatening this other it's pretty harsh, right?
It is, yeah. I mean, and it's a lot of fun. What saved the first story for me was the I love the art. The art by
Yeah,
David Lapham
David Levinson.
is fan. Yeah, Lapham is awesome. Trisha Mulvall and the colors.
Yep.
It really is visually. It's a very stunning and perfectly suited for the story. A very horrific story. But
Yeah.
Gogamora tree. I mean, it's a 1,700-year-old tree in a backyard. The roots go all the way down to hell because it's been planted for so long, and the roots eventually, I guess you could say, infect the young mind of this young
Yeah.
girl who loves the tree. And this girl named Daphne eventually becomes almost obsessed and almost possessed by
Yeah.
the psychologically possessed by the tree, and she ends up injuring one of her young friends, and her own it sort of corrupts, makes her parents argue because Daphne starts not going outside to play and not playing with her friends. She just spends all her time staring at the tree and afraid to go near it, and eventually it has a just of course a horrific, terrible ending, which is what Creepshow is about.
It's
So
so
I'm
terrible.
like you. It's like I read 2 reviews of Creepshow too, and I was
Mhm.
like, I was like, guys, like, I mean, I'm a sucker for a happy ending, but if I want a happy ending, I don't read Creepshow.
No, and I'm telling you, you have to always remember that the creep, he's there at the end. He's gonna be the one celebrating every time at the end. The only way that he's gonna celebrate is if somebody, or if not all of them, die a horrific death, or at least get possessed, or disappear, because this girl ends up in I did like I think that, and I said this before, I think that David Lapham, a lot of times his art, some of the panels really remind me of Allred, Michael Allred, and I love his art, so I really like this as well, but this actually got a little different because when I say that, it also then veers towards kind of a horror type feel that I wouldn't think that that would normally fit, and it does. And at one point, you have that play where this girl, yeah, she's being possessed, it seems, by the tree, but she also has some problems. And her mom and dad, whether or not they get that anger from it or this, whatever, but they're not the greatest people either. You're slapping her in the face. So she is very upset. And when the mom slaps this girl in the face, the dad looks like he thinks it's the greatest thing he's ever seen. And then she goes into her room like, "Oh man, I'm going to my room." And she starts picking up stuff because this is after she hurts her friend. They invited the friend. She didn't even invite the friend. It's like, "Hey, let's get this friend," because she's kind of depressed. And you kind of go with that early teen type deal where some kids, they're going through changes and stuff and they start to get, depressed or whatnot. So they think they'll snap it out. She's not playing with her dolls anymore. But you could play the thing of, well, she's just getting older. She's just, but they want to get this friend. This friend gets hurt. And she's supposed to call and apologize. Ends up calling, but in a way that I thought was pretty cool because she never does really grab the phone in the present, it seems, because she kind of gets possessed to call and basically just says the worst stuff to
Yeah.
this guy. So I'm gonna kill you and chop you in pieces, like really bad stuff. But when she goes to clean up her room, because her parents say, these people are coming over, the parents of that kid, and your room's a pigsty. When she ends up seeing that the roots have come into the house, she does react. And there's bugs on it, Meg. She reacts like that's where she needs her mom and dad. She needs them then. She even yells out, "Mom, mom, dad, quick, come here, help me." And that's where the it really sticks its, I'll say, its roots into it. Like, yeah, I'm the only
Oh,
one who loves you. And I'm sitting there, I'm like, first when she's cleaning up, I'm like, isn't she a little too old to start growing pot in her room? What's going on? Oh no, it's the tree. But I like that. The idea that she starts calling out for her mom. And you do see at points where all of a sudden it seems to get real cold, where you see her breath or whatever that is, but that symbolism of, stuff's kind of going on there. And she, "Mom, dad, help, help." And then, "No, you don't. I'm the only one who loves you." And you're like, it is that play at the end. Everybody seems to die, right? And a horrific death. She escapes, but did she? Because she crawls into this tree after setting the house on fire
yeah.
while her parents are entertaining guests, right? But in that, you can pull it back. And this is why I like the creep show stuff here. Horrific end, but at points you often sit there and say, were they looking at it the wrong way? Like, this little girl just wanted somebody to love her, and the parents weren't there at the most vulnerable time. This swept in, maybe if they were better, or maybe if she realized, or maybe she didn't do this. And that's what I like. The idea not of, oh man, the good at heart always win out or whatnot. I like this play of it looking kind of realistic, but when could this have changed? Could this have been averted? Is this a deal? Should they have gotten the hell out of that house? I mean, that tree is huge and really looks kind of in a sexy deal with that big knot in there. But I also like the idea too when that friend comes over and says, "Man, your tree looks bigger." I'm getting the idea that the tree thought that was fat shaming, and that's why she ended up hurting him. Like, it was very odd. Like, that's not really an insult unless you think of it as something. If I came over and, hey, your wife's getting bigger, like, that wouldn't be very good. And I'm like, is that what it was? Like, a sensitive tree. But yeah, and she even thinks of things of like, you know, just murdering people, and it doesn't seem like that would be her, but, what do you think?
Well, it's funny. There's an old expression that for some of us, we shouldn't be allowed in our own minds without adult
Mhm.
supervision. And so when I think of a young child, where this speaks as something more than just on the surface, this is just a straight up. You could say a straight up horror where there's a haunted tree that possesses and destroys a family. But as you said, there really is more to that. And if you can't see more than that, then don't buy Creepshow, because Creepshow
No.
always has something. There's always some theme, something underneath the surface other than just the horror, and it's a reflection of our darkest selves. And you got to
Yeah.
wonder how many children, like you said, that are alone, live by themselves, have parents that maybe aren't even paying attention. I mean, it's interesting that the kid who's almost never around, this kid, this Yash kid or whatever his
Yeah,
name is,
yeah,
he notices that the tree's gotten bigger, and her own parents don't notice things like that
yeah.
because they're not paying attention to their
Yeah, they're not
daughter.
paying
But
attention, yeah.
in fact, the only reason they start paying attention to their daughter is when she actually stays in the house, because usually they like when she's outside and she's not around.
Exactly,
The
and then
moment she's
start blaming each other.
Yeah,
Like,
exactly.
oh, I mean, the guy again, this fight has happened probably a trillion times. The idea where, "Oh, man, she's all moody. What are you doing with her during the day?" Well, and the dad says, "You're her mother, why don't you?" And "You're her dad." "Yeah, but I work all day." And it is one of those things where you get that, and I'm glad you kind of phrased it in the way, the idea of this family being torn apart and get but were they even a family at that point? Like, they really were having some problems, and it might have been the tree, it might have been them, but it seems like it brought out the darkest of it, and again, you could take the tree out, and it's just the idea that these parents aren't paying attention and have let this go. We kinda had that in the first issue a little bit, but that was more of a divorce and spending
That's
money and,
right.
"Hey, I'm the best," you know what I mean? And it wasn't exactly what that girl needed. But this girl's just kinda left on her own, and there's a tree. It's never like, that's the thing, you never have her like, "Tree, I love you. You're my best friend."
Yeah.
Nothing like that. It just ends up where she's kind of a depressed girl. She's keeping to herself, but this tree is kind of there to push these vibes and things like that. So it is pretty crazy. The next story, though, is kind of funny to me because, boy, I've read some things where there's, a diss track kind of things. Boy, this is a diss track to Marvel Studios and Disney especially, but even DC, all of these where you have these older creators and they make a character and then somebody swoops in, either the idea of them changing it and then it becomes popular and almost like, oh, well, that's my character now. Or a movie comes out and say a Rocket Raccoon becomes really popular, but it's not what you had. This guy is a creator, almost like a Jack Kirby-esque guy. And he's there, he's in his house, he has somebody watching over him. And the big play is that he had these nice creations. He was a comic. He actually wrote and drew a comic. And you end up where things have changed. It looks like his creation went through the 90s, but then also it ended up being in a movie and became real popular, but it's not what he wanted, and he's not getting a dime from it, he says, and he's pissed off. And it's again, like a creep show deal. At one point, it is actually just a kind of cool comic to read to see, a sad story of a former comic book creator that seems to kind of be a legend, but really is just living there by himself. Nobody pays attention because it wasn't his thing that they really like now in the movies and things like that. But then it takes the creep show turn and starts to get crazy. But did you like this?
I didn't. Yeah, at first I thought it was, I thought it was taking a few pot shots at Stan Lee because, it's funny,
Yeah.
I don't think you said the phrase Stan Lee. I saw Stan Lee the moment I saw this creator rights,
Okay.
as in last rights, and so there was that ugliness at near the end of Stan Lee's life where he was in the nursing home where he was cared for and his caregivers were allegedly suing him or
Abusing.
there was allegations against him, and
Yeah.
I don't like thinking about that,
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
man who's a legend like that, and so I'm looking at this but I'm looking at this. This is a comic book called Creepshow, and there's a Stan Lee analog character in it that's going to be subjected to horror. So I was really curious to see
Yeah.
how this
Yeah.
was going to end. And so I kind of like how they played with it a bit. And he's bitter, he's upset. But of course, the real bad guys are the people that are caring for him, who they seem
Yeah.
like fans at first, almost like the nursing guy who's caring for him
Oh
and wants
yeah.
to try to get
Seems like
along
he
with him.
got the
And
job to care for a guy that he thought was a really great guy and wanted to, get, oh man, I can get near him and find out all the things. He didn't feel like he was bad at all, right?
yeah,
Felt like he was a real fan.
but
And even like, giving this guy the attention that he really needs at the end of his life. This guy probably got a lot of attention up to a point, but now everybody has ditched him to the point where his main character he created is kind of like his little silent invisible friend here, and it gets sus, like it gets a little over the top
yeah.
with his demands and stuff there. It's like a Harvey type situation, but not quite. At first it's like, oh, that's cute,
Well,
it's sad, you think maybe, oh,
I
Alzheimer's, whatever, but
I like that
good,
he's
a good
given
start.
the guy has to give this old man, this Mr. Medina is the guy's name.
Yeah.
This old man, Mr. Medina, they're giving him sponge baths and has to bathe him and everything else.
Yeah.
And you come to discover through the course of the story that they're frustrated with him because this Mr. Medina, actually, as bitter as he is, he actually got a pretty good payout, a royalty. He's got
Yeah.
a significant amount of royalty checks that are paid to him by the I guess the comic book or movie companies,
Yeah.
but he's not cashing the checks. So
Yeah, and they're hidden somewhere, and that's what they want. And you find out that this guy, even from the very beginning, he goes and he's going to try to worm his way in, and he goes up to this guy and he's like, "Hey, by the way, I don't even like the movies. I fell asleep during the second one." Like pats him, and it's this slow con deal where he's like,
yeah.
"Oh well, if I wanted, to really get into what you did, can you tell me the books?" Okay, he goes up like this guy. He probably likes the attention. Oh my god, and you have he comes back. I didn't know you also drew them. Holy crap. And he goes, yeah, yeah, we all did that back in the day and whatnot. But everything is like that, trying to push him to trust him because eventually he's, hey, where are those checks? And but it takes too long.
Yeah.
And so he's doing this with a partner and they end up, come
My
on,
my
just go
favorite
get it.
line, my favorite line in the whole story was because they're frustrated with the old man and they're looking for the checks and they say, "Did you already cash it and forget the checks, Grandpa? Huh? Spend it all on effing depends."
Yeah, yeah, it depends. What a jerk.
I laugh.
Even then, he says to us, "Yeah, I'm pretty sick of wiping this guy's ass. I'm gonna do it." So he gets in and he dresses up and he goes in. But that's the play. That's what the fun play of this is that when he is going in to get this guy. I mean, this guy. He can't get around by himself. You even see he needs to be helped showering, doing all that. So he's not exactly good, but he has that, old character there who ends up like, all right, I'm going to line up my robo scouts. And it ends up being this crazy battle going on. But again, this is Creep Show, so it's not going to be like like I don't know how somebody would think that if it would end with a happy ending. Obviously, you'd have the old man live and that, but there's not really that much room for a great happy ending here. You know what I mean? So you do get the satisfaction that the guy does seem to get killed, and he gets killed by a statue of the character that plays out well with the idea of these imaginary characters attacking him and doing all that still. And even then, I like this idea in this book where you could tell me, well, those characters did come to life, and then I could say, well, hey, but it's Creep Show, so you don't know. But the guy, I wish the guy reacted as if these things, but he's kind of just going forward and just being a piece of crap. I mean, this guy's the worst. But at one point, you do end up having our main guy, he cracks the guy upside the head with his cane, which that's pretty good. I was like, all right, good for you. And then it becomes like almost like a Lilliputian type deal where all these little characters are coming out and trying to attack him. But yeah, all said and done, he ends up being able to knock the bookshelf back and this trophy, this or not trophy, this thing. I wish it would have been something like an Eisner or something like that, some award. It didn't have to be a specific deal, but I wish it was an award deal just to show us like, yeah, that guy was really something. But it ends up going through the guy. And then I don't know. I think that the main guy dies, but he's happy as he
Yeah.
dies. I don't know because he's just there underneath the shelf smiling. Like I did it. I finally did it. Like that was that one last battle that he wanted to
Yeah.
fight and have the character do it. It's just so crazy. I
Yeah.
mean, it really is.
Well, it is crazy, and he's probably getting dementia too, for all you know. And
Oh, yeah.
it ends.
Oh, I think he is
I,
because you realize when he's fighting this guy at the very end, he sees the guy as a version of that character he created, but the 90s type
right.
version where it's
Yeah,
not what he was dressed up like
that's right.
before. And he's like, I'm going to kill
Yeah,
you.
and
Uh,
that's perfectly in keeping with the final thing, because Creepshow shows up at the end and say, well, they say comics will rot your brains. Looks like they might crack your skull while you're at it. Keep turning those pages, creeps, and don't stack your long boxes too high. I mean,
yeah.
it was a really good ending, and it was I mean, another entertaining story for
telling you.
Creepshow, I think.
I'm telling you, it's another one. I think that we actually picked two books that actually really go well. Of okay, read them, but when you when you talk to somebody about them, they are a lot more fun. I think maybe because they're so dark. I mean, that first story is dark as hell. It really is. But when you talk out loud about it with somebody else, it's not as eerie and yucky as it would be in your head. Like if I'm sitting there, I'm like, yeah, that girl's chopping up the piece. Like it starts to get a little too dark to actually just monologue to yourself about. But when you actually talk about it and start to like just making jokes or liking this and liking that and then talking about it, it actually makes it a little lighter and easier to talk about and enjoy because I think that I was like around a 7 for this going in. I might actually have gone up to an 8, a whole point higher of us talking only because the art is really good.
Yeah,
And the art,
yeah,
especially in that first story, is great. It really is. And David Lapham is starting to become one of my favorite artists. He ended up having a backup this week at DC as well that I really like the art in. So in that though, it is a dark deal. And if you want a happy ending, you're not going to find it. It's not that. I mean, if you read the first book, and these people are reviewing it, did you not read the story where a little 8-year-old kid gets disemboweled, even though he tried to throw up the candy bar because he took too many? He took more than one. And they're like, oh man, this isn't like, where's the happy endings and the lessons? And like the lessons are if the creep comes, you're done. It just end up, you just go, you're done. But well, what would you give this?
I would. I was actually probably at a 7.5 to begin with, and
Okay.
I'm inclined to say I can come up. Again, I'm having more fun talking with you about this
Yeah.
than I did when I actually read it. So I'll go up maybe to I could go up to probably 7, 8, an 8
Okay.
myself.
Yeah.
Like it is entertaining. It's more fun talking about this stuff.
Yeah.
And just a final comment on this old guy who dies. He dies surrounded by his action figures, killing the guy who's trying to steal his royalty checks. Stanley Analog. It just goes to show happiness is a state of mind. I think that's the theme of these
Yeah.
stories. This guy dies under horrific circumstances, but he dies with a smile on his face because he goes on his terms, at least terms as he reimagines in his mind. And the girl at the beginning here, the girl with the Gogomora tree, she
Mhm.
also, you never know, she's seeing something maybe different in her mind as well.
Yeah.
And where she started off happy, all she ended up seeing was horror when not everyone else could see that. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And really actually you say that, the idea that this old guy looks like he dies, he has a happy ending. He's
yeah,
smiling and he even says, nothing can stop infrared and his trusty pal Sal. That's a cool thing that he got to go down swinging at the end and all in all, this guy who was trying to, swindle him and rob him, that shack is still there somewhere, right? This guy didn't care about the money. He was more about that idea of his character changing, and probably in principle of getting screwed over. That was more of what he was upset, and maybe just upset because people ended up not really giving him credit for the character and stuff that he really liked. And at the end, whether or not it's in his mind, in his house where he's fighting this guy, he got that one last comic booky battle that he got to fight against somebody with his pal and ends up dying right next to him. And he seems like if you're going to get a happy ending, that's about as happy as you're going to get in this. And even then, it's like there's the creep just there with the action figure pulling it apart and stuff. I'm like, you're so awful.
Well,
He's so awful.
the last words that the old guy says, I think, is "mighty meteors." I think that's supposed to be like Avengers Assemble or something.
Exactly. It's like one of those old school deals. And that's what I like, where even, I mean, at the beginning, when you really see that cartoony deal, come on, Sal. And he's like, that's again, like, if you want to picture what this guy's heaven might be, it probably would be that some, alien cartoon planet where he's running around with that character and they're just running around having fun and doing adventures. And yeah, he's like, I'm right behind you. Hey. And then, like you said, mighty meteors, like all that stuff going on. And it almost even plays out right there of this guy who, a simpler time and a simpler thing, even the comic books before they got so dark, you're even playing that. That's what I like, the layers that you end up having in these. And that certainly does have some, especially for comic book readers. Like, you go back and read some Golden and Silver Age stuff compared to even stuff now where everything's deconstructed. This guy just wanted to have fun. And now it's about the money and it's about I like this. Here, to just go one little bit longer. He's like the pure comic book guy who was doing that back in the day because that's what he loved. And now the whole play of the darkness and the fights with money, and this person can get that TV show and that movie, that never was anything he was into. So even though he did end up settling out of court and got that check, he didn't seem to even cash it. And if he did, he didn't spend the money. And yeah, he just kind of wants that simpler time. And at the end, he gets to do it as that guy horrifically dies right next to him. So that's Creepshow for you. And I thought it was really well played. But yeah, 8 out of 10 for me.
Yeah,
8 out of 10. I'm glad that we ended up liking these more because I was reading that and I was like, you know what I mean? Like these are okay, but I like coming on the show and having things that we really like, even though I said it's a crapshoot. Because we don't end up, we just pick the books and we're here to review them. We're not going to fake the funk or anything, but we've been pretty lucky. The stuff that we picked for the most part, we've liked most of it. And some of the stuff it's a shame that we don't get back to some of it, but we will. We will. Like this week, you even said, I didn't realize that Bloodshot came out, that new Bloodshot, that we really liked that first issue. And we'll maybe do that next week. We'll figure it out. We'll figure out, the kind of things. Because me and you ended up having some cross wires of even some of the books that we were going to talk about tonight. That's why we have two.
Yeah. Well, that was my fault. For some reason, we were going to. I apologize to people. We were going to review the second issue of Boogeyman, which I was unfortunately I screwed up. I misremembered, and I thought we were reviewing Vanish. But I mean, this is what you call a first world problem, misremembering what comic books I have to read.
Comic books you have to read. And that's the thing. Me and you go and do this and we kind of, maybe we have to get in touch a little more as we're getting ready. I actually thought, did we say we were doing it? I know we're doing it this week, but I thought maybe something came up with Halloween. But then you messed me. I'm like, all right. And I was in the middle of reading and finishing. And just as an aside, saying we were going to do Boogeyman, I didn't really like the second issue. Just as a little mini review here, I thought it was a bit confusing, and it just the fun and the kind of the mystery of the first issue, you end up not really advancing much of that in the second, where you have the father death and the little kid and the dog, the wolf. They hit the road. It felt a little off, but I'm still. I hope that you do read it and let me know what you think, and maybe we could do that, or at least the number 3 when it comes out. But yeah, I was a little bit down on it. I didn't read Vanish. I'm going to read that probably sometime this week. And I heard some people kind of say it wasn't as cool as the first one either. Well, so
I want to give a shout out too, because one of the things we haven't mentioned, because it's not part of the stories, is that in Creepshow number 2, there is a preview. There is a 3-page preview of Chroma, which is was actually I actually kind of like the preview. It's
Yeah, it
continued in
looks pretty
Chroma
good.
issue 1, and it's an interesting. Looks to be kind of interesting about this beast
Yeah.
that they're unleashing to hunt down in this village, and it's probably the art looks pretty good. I'm not sure not sure. Superstar Lorenzo De Felici of Oblivion Song debuts a new
Okay.
prestige series this November. So it's I mean, just another way of saying that Creepshow number 2, it's not only do you get 2 good stories, and we reviewed them, but a good preview of other things that are coming out from
Hmm.
Image, and so it's another reason to pick it up. And this thing's only $3.99, and I got to tell you, but my bias is I buy a lot of DC, and I think DC's overpriced, quite frankly.
Hmm.
And
Yes.
it's really nice to see that the indie and Image in particular are kind of keeping holding the line at $3.99.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And also, just if we're gonna go full out into it too, I think the cover's awesome. I thought that that was really cool. And just a shout out, if they ended up listening, Alex Antone is the editor of this. He's a really good guy. He was a guy who was at DC at one point, and I used to ask him a lot of things about what was going on, not like rumors or whatever. But if I ever had a question, I knew that I could ask him, and he would always answer me straight laced and right away. So when I saw that he was on it, no, if he is listening, I just want to mention one thing. You go between the stories and you have a ad at the one point for Mr. Lovenstein presents failure. This looks like I thought that was a fake ad because of like a creep show type deal. And I kept looking, I'm like, is this real or is this like some sort of like kind of like a gimmick type deal? Because it's in between the stories. And I'm like, and I think that it might play out weird because I kept jumping back and forth. Like
Did,
it seems
did you
funny.
read it? It says for failures of all ages, ages
Yeah,
17 and
exactly.
up.
That's I'm like, "Is this real or is this because it's there?" And then I'm looking, I'm like, "I don't get it." But, it made me laugh. It made me laugh, the whole deal, but I hope that people check out some of these books here, and we'll continue going on. We shouldn't miss many weeks. Like I said, I usually don't end up missing a show, even if I don't feel good, but last week, I don't even know what was hitting me, and, but we're back, and we'll be back next week, and hopefully we'll get the deal and we'll have that bloodshot because we really did like that first issue. So I want to check that out as well. And we'll coordinate and get some things going on. Maybe have some cool number ones. We're getting to the point, though, that we have a bunch of books that we already started. So at points, you have to decide, should we continue with that or go with the number one? Because I really do like number ones to get, people excited and see how things are more than maybe a number 3 or 4. But we'll see. We'll see how we play it.
Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I just, I'm looking forward to, I guess, Halloween. I guess it's Halloween tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow.
Yeah, so I'm
Tomorrow's
wearing
going.
people can't see me on the podcast, but I
Yes.
got my Black Adam cap arrived just in time for Halloween, my
Nice.
Black Adam shirt. So I'm set. So I'll be giving out candy, saying Shazam. So it'll be
That's what
good.
you'll be doing. The people are like, "I don't know about that guy down there.
Yeah,
I don't know what's going on with that Shazam
yeah,
guy."
give me a trick or treat or say Shazam, and that way you'll get
I
your candy.
actually I actually have a bowl, just take one, and I'm gonna wait there like the creep.
Oh yeah.
And you better take one. I actually told my kids about that story because they're the pieces of crap that went around. And this was where, again, the worst of the worst. These kids ended up taking advantage of pretty much the pandemic because you had kind of a shutdown of Halloween. But at points, I forget which year, a couple years ago, they were saying, like, listen, you can have it, but you have to leave the stuff outside. Nobody was giving it out. You had a lot of bowls of take one, and my kids, they're jerks. They're just, I yelled at them so bad. I'm sitting there like eating candy. It's coming, you kids getting this as I'm eating their candy. But I told them they're too old now anyway. So that it kind of does get to be sad. Some of these holidays that are more based for kids when your kids are too old and think they're too cool for things. But we'll see. Maybe Logan will go out. He's too old, but he's kind of a little smaller, so he can get away with it. But
Yeah, well,
nobody's.
my mom bought for my daughter
Mhm.
a giant Peppa Pig witch, so
Oh, really?
we'll have that blown up. So yeah, so it'll be Black Adam
That's
and
cool.
Peppa Pig for
Peppa
Halloween. So
Pig. That's pretty cool. Yeah, we end up where we are. I don't even think we're gonna give out candy. We'll have to see. It's a bummer. It is once your kids get too old because that was a fun time. Even though at that point, I mean, I was one of those jerks that sometimes I'd complain. It used to be. It was a lot colder back in the day. It's kind of cold right now, but it's not as cold. So that's cool. But you're gonna get 10 inches of snow, so that's crazy.
Yeah.
But with that, that's it. So everybody remember, go into the show notes and please go and check out Rocky and his Comic Boom YouTube channel. Even if you are listening or watching on his YouTube, give a little like and subscribe if you haven't done that before. And,
And
check
hit
out all the
hit the
things,
Weird
especially him and
Science,
Jace. Yeah.
Weird
Just
Science DC, Weird Science Marvel, Weird Science Manga, and what am I missing? There's more than that.
who
Weird
knows?
Science Indie. I mean, you're
Weird
incredible.
Science everything.
Yeah.
We had a mail this week on the show from Luis who said, "If you weren't doing the comic book podcast, what podcast would you like to do?" I'm like, "I'm too tired already. I can't even think of any other things. I'm done." But yeah, we have all those things. But yeah, all that'll be in the show notes. So check those out. Make sure you watch Jace and Rocky do the DC stuff on the Comic Boom channel. That's what I do. That gets me rolling for the week and stuff like that with
Yeah.
the books and stuff. So
Jim and Eric.
yeah,
Yeah.
check all that. Oh,
All
but
right.
that's it, right?
That's it. And until next time, it's Comic Boom and Weird Science out.
Out.